Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Representative Mike Haridopolos, Chairman of the House Science Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics, and Sam Skove, Space and Emerging Tech Reporter at POLITICO, who will discuss Congress's work on space exploration.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Sam Skove. I cover space for POLITICO. It's great to be joined by Representative Haridopolos today. We have a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in space right now. Both things that I think people have a little, make some people a little nervous, some people excited. Just to start from the top, the biggest news is the proposed budget. There are significant cuts for NASA in that budget. There's also an interesting focus on Mars. So just kind of wondering how you're thinking through that budget. Do you think that that will be the end state once all said and done?
Well, first of all, Sam, thanks for hosting us today. And it's great to be here today talking about such a vital issue to our, not only, of course, my state, but most importantly, the world. I mean, it is exciting to see rockets taking off once again from Florida, because it wasn't too many years ago that we relied on Russia to actually get into outer space, to go to our own space station, the very people we were fighting the Cold War against not too many years prior. So it's a radically changed world for the better. But to answer your question, will a 26% cut to NASA hold? Absolutely not. We're going to be talking with the president and his team at the OMB and talking about the paramount importance of space. It's not a recreational sport. This is national security centric. We're in a Cold War once again with China. If we want to keep space dominance in place, not just by launching the most rockets to put up satellites, but to make sure that our men and women in military have the GPS coordinates they need to work successfully to protect our nation, I think you're going to see that number be greatly reduced. Of course, my goal would be to bring back to not only zero, but move the needle, because we rely so much on telecommunications as paramount in your business, let alone ours. And I think that when the president sees the entire picture, the great thing about when you invest in space, there's an ROI there. This isn't just a cost, there's also a benefit. And so I think that under the good work of Dr. Babbitt in my world, who's the full Science Committee chair, working in a bipartisan way, the great news about serving on the Space Subcommittee as chairman is that it's not the Judiciary Committee where everything's a dogfight. We have a lot of common ground there. I am in very good communication with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and we share the vision that NASA is paramount, and that if we invest in NASA, it's a win for the United States of America.
And are there areas to that point in NASA that you think deserve either to be preserved or even gain more investment that were cut? Where do you see sort of the key points being?
Well, I've been through this. And so 100 people understand my background. I'm not just from Florida. I'm the former president of the Senate. So I literally wrote the budget in the state of Florida as leader. I wrote a lot of the tax laws in our state back in the day when I did that as well. And so it's not so when there's a governor in my old days saying, here's the proposed budget, that's a starting point. I mean, I'm a former history professor, constitutional teacher, political science, and so there's checks and balances here, folks. It's not just the executive branch saying this is what you're going to do. And so remember that the President of the United States created the Space Force. I mean, an entire new wing of our military. And so he has a heart for space. He still has a great relationship with Elon Musk. He believes in public-private partnerships, et cetera. So when I look at those, quote, cuts, I think that is a more of, hey, this is the OMB looking for savings potentially. But as when you vet out these issues, I think just about every program is able to justify those expenses. You saw that, and to show you, I think the intent here, remember when they did all of these RIFs, as they were called? One area was not reduced was NASA. I mean, there were very few things other than the DEI political stuff. The nuts and bolts of NASA have been held in check, and in a positive way, and the new telescopes that we have that will be coming out again, the Grace next year, hopefully, those were kept in place as well. And so what's initiated in this process, as I'm finding out in Washington, isn't necessarily what comes out on the other side, which is a good thing for NASA.
And you raised an interesting point on the national security front. A lot of people think of NASA as being just very, very related to peaceful endeavor, and it is, but it has all these interesting national security hook-ins. Where do you see that sort of the national security argument for NASA landing? What sort of arguments do you bring up in that way?
Well, the argument I bring up is pretty simple. With those, by investing in these different companies, whether it be Northrop, L3 Harris, and just so many other groups that are involved in the program, is that those are the ones who put our satellites up. And it's not just to make sure we had MTV in the past or Netflix working. Or you're seeing some of the emerging technologies that are happening there also. If you remember just a few years ago, the government invested $40 billion in rural broadband. Okay, remember, if you want rural broadband, you got to dig the holes. You have to get a permit to do it. You got to hire a lot of people. You got to stretch out that cable in some places, some farms that are way off the main. That's a lot of money and time. Starlink and its competitors can do it for a heck of a lot less, and you don't have to wait 3 or 4 years to get it. And so, to remember that part of the commercial aspect, and NASA is of paramount importance there because they're the one who share those technologies. The second part of that is the military is so important because you've seen in the nefarious actions by China. Remember, not too many years, they purposely collided things in space and the debris that followed. And that's a big deal to a lot of satellite manufacturers because when there's that debris out there, they have to use some of the energy within that satellite to maneuver around, and that means that the shelf life of that satellite actually goes down. So there's a lot of mixed components there, and the Chinese, not only that, but they're using hypersonics. And so the military component that we're going to see a lot of play here, and again, and this helps NASA in turn, is the Golden Dome is real. It is in operation. L3 Harris, which is actually in my district, that is the technology. Should God forbid a foreign adversary like a China or Iran or North Korea, but maybe even some other terrorist situation where that Golden Dome could be our saving grace, because these hypersonics are amazing technology, and we need to make sure we can combat that threat, which is ever increasing.
And so there's obviously also this sort of race back to the moon, the US versus China. China is planning a 2030 landing. We have a landing that's theoretically sometime in mid-2027. Do you feel like we're on pace to meet that goal? What concerns do you have about beating China back to the moon?
Well, it's a real concern. Look, we are way behind with Artemis. Not only time, but money. There's still some challenges with the lander that some people have brought up. SpaceX right now is the lander. But I'll tell you what, SpaceX always manages to always come through. If you haven't read the bio with Isaac Min that he wrote about Elon Musk, very fascinating stuff, but in the end, Elon comes through. And to his credit, he's done some amazing things. And if you haven't had the chance to see a launch firsthand, I highly recommend you do it. The cool thing is, where I live, I can see one about every other day. I mean, there's been over 100 launches, I think, this year alone, and the amount of satellite work and military work that's going on there is important, and that lift that we have. But going to the moon is not a vanity project. The last time we were on the moon is 1972, and so we don't want to just plant the flag and take pictures. This is not a tourist operation. With the helium-3 issue, as you know, with the energy issues coming up, and also being on let's say, the southern portion of the moon is important. And the Chinese have proven not to be good actors, as I mentioned, in space. And so if they get there first, who knows what the heck they're going to do there? And candidly, I don't trust them. I mean, they don't follow basic actions such as the rule of law. Everyone in this room knows that they steal technology day in and day out. If you're relying on a Chinese court to rule in your favor, you got a long time to wait. So we have to win this for mankind. And the great thing about being a proud American is that we have been the most powerful nation in the world without question since 1945, and we've acted in a pretty benevolent way in comparison with other world powers in that same position. And I don't know if you could say the same about the Chinese, especially given their behavior as to what happened with COVID. They were not forthright, and they caused chaos around the world. And had they been more forthright, maybe the COVID crisis would not have been as severe. But this is not a vanity mission for us. We think that Artemis will go off next year. It's scheduled for April of next year. We're very optimistic. As you know, Artemis 1 was a complete success. This is a building on that. I think the question that people have, but I think that Elon will come through, is the lander issue. It's radically different. If you've not seen the old, I call it almost a spider, that's got a squat vehicle. This new one is a more vertical vehicle. Some people have concerns about that, but Elon Musk is a miracle worker, and I love what he's done for our country, and I think he'll prevail again. And the good news is that we don't rely just on SpaceX, and there's Blue Origin's another one that provides a more conventional model. So should Elon come to us and say we're behind, I think that maybe Blue Origin can pick up that slack if necessary.
And it raises an interesting question of, to go back to the budget cuts, it is true that the NASA has been delayed on certain projects, over budget on certain projects. Artemis is a great example of that. Are there reforms in sort of how they do business that you would like to see?
Look, every part of the budget can be touched. And look, I'm a proud Republican, but you can't just look at social programs and put them under the DOGE microscope. We have to do that across the board, and we need to be candid with ourselves. If you have credibility, you have to call yourself on it. So the military needs to go under that. Remember, they failed these audits as well. It's not just some of the social programs. They have failed us. NASA always has, of course, some ability, and I've gone to NASA and said, look, we're all in this together. We're $1 trillion minimum budget shortfall, 36 trillion, if not more, overall. We're all in this together, and you can't just go in there and say, cut everything else, but not mine. And even though I represent the Space Center, everyone has to put skin in the game, so to speak. And so innovation is what drives success. And I think what we have asked NASA to say is, what do you have to have versus a thing that's a vanity project or something we can maybe push off to the private sector or incentivize but not fully fund? That's the outside the box thinking we have to do, because remember, if politicians before me have been through this before, and we talked about it before we spoke, it wasn't too many years ago that I was told the shuttle would be intact when President Obama ran for re-election. Guess what happened? They said, we're out of here. And other space programs have been put on the shelves. And a lot of the projects we're talking about now is actually spare parts from prior investments by Congress. So you can never guarantee anything in this business. The best way to guarantee some future is to have success, and that's why I've told every NASA contractor, let alone the major people in my own district, Artemis better work this spring. If it doesn't, there's going to be a real challenge. I think we can bridge this gap right now, but they have to perform next spring. If they do, I think you'll have a nice domino effect. If they don't, it's going to be really hard for me to go to my friends in Congress and say, give us one more year when we're already over budget, and of course, the time has been pushed back.
And it raises an interesting question, too, about sort of what lessons were learned through the shuttle cancellation and through the sort of, Florida as a space economy used to be sort of a one industry or one customer environment. Can you talk through sort of lessons learned from the shuttle cancellation?
Well, the great thing about the space program today, it's not just the public sector. It's a PPP, public-private partnerships, and those partnerships have yielded us great results. I know you all live probably in the Washington bubble here, but I live in that community. And when we lost the Apollo program, it was the Great Depression in the 1970s in that area that was booming in the late 60s and early 70s during the Apollo years. It was a severe issue. We finally kind of came back. And so when we lost the shuttle again, fortunately, I was the president of the Senate. Rick Scott was the governor back then, and we actively solicited companies like Blue Origin, SpaceX, ULA, just a myriad of companies. They come to Florida. There's no state income tax. We got a right-to-work state. There happen to be some great beaches, and it's not cold as hell in the winter. And they said, it's not a bad idea. We'll come to Florida, and it has flourished. If you go to the area where I live today, and you were there 10 years ago, you couldn't believe it's the same place. And because we have actively went out, and sought these companies like AAR and others, and they came here, and they said, there's a good workforce here because of the old NASA team, and that it's a great quality place to live in, and we bridged that gap. We have to do it again this time, because if not, we're going to see a dip again, and I don't know if we can go to the well one more time. And so leadership matters. I trust the President of the United States. He believes in the space program. He knows that if we fall, there's no second place in space. And so I'm optimistic that we'll make this happen, but it takes leadership. And it takes us in Congress to bridge that gap that's been put before us between now and October 1 when the next budget's due.
And what are you hearing from either companies, constituents, people, either on the Florida side or national, when it comes to what space companies need to keep making those investments?
Well, those space companies they want more launch pads. I mean, this isn't a great problem to have. We need more launch pads. I mean, there's only so many. And so there's been open talk about extending the fence line so you can get in there. And so we are trying to make sure we stay the epicenter of space activity. And you see states like California making a mistake where you have these conservation groups that say, no, you can't launch from here. Because remember, sometimes it's better to launch from California given what you're trying to put up. Or some places we have competitors, like even New Zealand is in the business against this. So we need to stay at the cutting edge, and we need to make sure we make these investments. And remember, taxpayers have paid a hell of a lot of money to build the old runway for the shuttle, but more importantly, all of these operations. But for a long period of time, we would have 1 and 2 or 4 missions go up in the entire year. You have one going off every 3 days. You need more launch pads, and so we're doing that. And the odd thing, we were talking, Sam and I were talking before, people come to me and say, we need more wastewater. I'm like, I'm talking about space. Well, when you have more people in a certain area, you need to move that stuff off. And we're kind of laughing. If you haven't been to Kennedy Space Center and you look around, there's a lot of palmetto bushes. And you know who loves palmetto bushes? Hogs. Okay, you have feral pigs out there, and we got to literally hire in such a huge area to knock out the feral pig population to make sure it's a safe area to operate. And it's sort of a sidetrack, yeah.
You don't think about those things when you think about how to launch a space company or how to.
What I love is not everybody goes to college. I was a college professor, so it's a little different. But only about 30% of the people go to college. People want a great job. And so one of the programs we've incorporated, because Blue Origin, SpaceX, and ULA, and Aerobus, and all these other has said, we need technicians. And so I was literally at Airbus last week, and SpaceX and Blue a few weeks prior, and they're like, these kids, 18, 19 years old, they're an important part of this program. And these aren't just jobs, these are careers. And so these kids are making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 out of college, out of high school, and with benefits on top of it. And those are great jobs. And these are the these are the clean manufacturing jobs we all want to have in America. And Blue Origin spent multiple billions. SpaceX just invested another $1.8 billion in their facilities. And if you go there, it's top of the line stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and there's so much discussion about bringing American industry back to the U.S. The space industry is arguably one of the few that has been vertically integrated for a while. Do you get the sense that there's enough capacity when it comes to that trained workforce? Or do you see room for Congress to sort of stimulate that educational growth?
Well, the good thing is that I literally was on the phone this morning, the way I operate, talking with my superintendent, and they are making way within the K through 12 system so that people in 10th, 11th, 12th grade can get these skills while they're getting their high school diploma to go out and have that technical degree to go out to work, or that go further enough along so that if they get hired by one of these major companies in our area, that after a few weeks or a few months of training, they're operational. So we're not lacking in that. I don't think you have to go to Congress for everything, and that's the cool thing about working with the private sector. They understand that speed is action, and so they're willing to be partners, and they are very generous in our community. They know by having a well-educated K through 12 workforce, we really believe in STEM programs. It's something that Rick Scott and I worked on 12 years ago, are paying off today, because we want those young people to live in that community. And for a lot of years in Florida, you'd go to high school and then you'd leave Florida and you wouldn't come back until you're retiring. Now you can actually go to high school, get a job right out of high school that can allow you to have that middle class lifestyle, which everyone dreams of.
And not to overplay too much, but there is like a little bit of a rivalry now between Texas and Florida when it comes to space. They have this large fund that backs space companies. You guys are both pushing for to have the NASA's headquarters moved. Is there any update on the headquarters move discussion?
Well, who's a great guy? Dr. Babin. He is the chairman of the science committee, and he was the one who kind enough to appoint me to be the chairman of the space subcommittee. And he has been the chairman, as you know, for the last 10 years of the committee that I now chair. And he is an expert on space. It is a partnership that we have between Texas and Florida. Of course, we both want the headquarters in our home state. Don't get me wrong. One thing we all agree on is it needs to get the heck out of Washington, D.C. We want to go where the action is. We want to go, and that's clearly going to be probably Texas or Florida. I don't like your chances in Ohio. I know you're an Ohio guy. I like our chances in Florida. I like our chances in Texas. I hope that we win that fight. But I think that what is important is we want to go where the action is. And sometime when the action's in Washington, you lose that focus. And you want to, and I make the argument, of course, is where does it all come together? It comes together in Florida. And of course, Dr. Babin and Senator Cruz say, well, you know, that's just where we actually handle flight operations in Texas. You might want to have it there. Whatever it might be, we are in all agreement that we should move it out of Washington and put it where the action is. And we want to entice these companies to build up even more. Because what the biggest fear I have is if we don't come together and get the NASA or space priorities right, there's a vacuum. And the last thing we want people to do is to see that vacuum and go to China and some of the things that they do. They're already stealing our technology, as I said before, and they've already done these in the Far East Acts in space. And I don't want some of the partnerships that we've formed in a positive way. You know, ESA and others are working with us now to go and say, oh, we're going to go over to China because they're doing it, and America took a step back. We need to take a step forward, not a step back.
So you have concerns, let's say, if Gateway actually is canceled or any other programs with ESA, the European Space Agency, they may say, hey, we invested this money, we want to do something. We're a little more open to China working with us now.
Well, think about it. If there's no American space station, I mean, we're slowly degrading, as you know. By 2030, we anticipate it being gone. We need to have a new platform, because if there's no platform and the only option is the Chinese platform, logic says they're going to go there. Even if they're not the most trustworthy bank, it's the only place in town to do it. So I think we need to have Gateway. It makes sense to me. We've already invested a lot of money in it. We have European partners, as you know, with that program, and a significant investment, which is not common to have the Europeans invest like they have. And this is how we show world leadership. If we don't do it, we're ceding potential opportunities to our biggest threat. And China, it has, as if you haven't read the books, it's what I do for a living, they have a 100-year mission. And they want to return to their former status from many centuries ago. I don't want them to get them there. They don't share our values. They're a communist dictatorship, and they have already proven in recent history that they don't care for the rule of law. We do, and we need to keep this ultimate high ground. And I think if we cede this window of opportunity to the Chinese, it will be to the detriment to the United States.
And there's another interesting thing at play here, whereas we had a nominated NASA administrator. A lot of people were very in favor of Mr. Isaacman. His nomination was pulled. And now Janet Petro, who is obviously quite able, is back to that, or will continue on for some amount of time. What concerns do you have about not quickly nominating a new NASA administrator?
Well, I think the president's going to step up and quickly name a new administrator. I hope they move through the process. The Senate's not the fastest place in America, so we need to push it through. There's no doubt. But good that Janet Petro is a very good friend of mine. She's from my home community. I think she's ably handled this transition period and the rifts that did take place and the changes that took place. But we wanted a NASA administrator, and I think that the president will act quickly in this. I don't know exactly what happened. I like Mr. Isaacman. I never had the chance to talk with him one-on-one because I wanted to keep that separation until he was actually in place. But a very capable guy. I think he has a bright future. For whatever reason, didn't work out with himself and the president, but that's the president's prerogative. But the president loves space. I had the honor of being on Air Force One with him, and he asked me all kinds of questions. Hey, what's going on the Space Coast? What's going on in the space industry? What's your take on this and that? He is engaged on the issue. For whatever reason, they didn't work out with Mr. Isaacman. I think he'll step up quickly. And look, the good thing is Ted Cruz, Dr. Babin in our world, these are capable people. They know the space industry well. We're going to advise the president until that NASA administrator is fully in place, confirmed by the Senate. And I think we can still step forward and work together. Remember, there happen to be some important NASA assets in Louisiana. I don't know if you heard this. This is good. And I think that might help us also remind that this is not just Florida, not just Texas. This is a national program with national significance, let alone right down the road in Maryland. We have, of course, Goddard and others, which is important as we look beyond. And I kind of had some, I'd call it fun, but we had a real conversation in my subcommittee recently about the potential Earth destruction. We heard about the asteroid a few months ago that had a 3% chance of striking the Earth, and how we might have to use some of that new technology that we developed to deflect it so it doesn't hit the United States. It was important that we had these kind of conversations and look out into the universe, because should that projectile be heading our way, not just in the movies, but in real life, that we need as much lead time as possible to handle literally that world threat.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of amazing stuff NASA works on that is, you start reading into it, like the asteroid deflection, and it seems pretty important to keep. I know that these sorts of budget details can get kind of obscure, but are there programs or any areas in NASA where you feel like they have spent a little bit too much money on things, or been too slow, or you could see cutting it or reducing it in that final budget?
Well, I think that's where this is where the transparency in the budget is so necessary. What I find so foreign in this town, I came from Florida, literally the Sunshine State. I literally was the person who created a thing called Transparency Florida, where everything in the budget is not only available to me, the legislator, or now congressman, but the entire state can say this is where we're spending the money. In this town, they hide all kinds of stuff. I think we should put everything out there for public consumption. That's why you had the USAID chaos. Like, how the hell are you spending this much money on that when we're in a budget shortfall? Give me a break. So let's put it all out there, and let's pick winners and losers, in essence, or at least prioritize A to Z, what's most important, what's least important. As a new member of Congress, I can't say I know exactly where to pinpoint those, but I've been saying to my own folks at NASA, look, this is real. We're playing real bullets here. You need to rank what's most important to you. Just like when we do the changes in the workforce, you need to go to your most capable people and say, we want you to stay. And the ones who maybe have outlived their usefulness, maybe say, hey, you should take the buyout. These are honest conversations that businesses have every day. These are honest conversations that families who are in a tight situation with their budget have every day, and Washington needs to have. And so if they don't come forward and say, here's the thing you maybe can cut so you don't undercut the main mission, if they don't do that, then they're at the whims of calls of politicians, and that's always a different measure.
And one thing that was very clear in the budget is a greater focus on Mars, which is something that also President Trump called out in his inaugural speech. I know there's some anxiety that, Mars is hard, the moon is hard. If we try to focus on both at once, we won't get either done. Where do you come down on that debate? Well,
I come down, first of all, the moon first. We have expended a lot of money, a lot of time getting to the moon first, and that is what we're going to do. I want to beat the Chinese. I'm confident we will. I have absolute confidence in we will beat the Chinese. And I'm glad to hear, as you know, Elon Musk just announced going to Mars. I think that's part of his investment he's going to make. He's been very clear about that intent. But I think moon first. We learn a lot about getting to Mars by going to the moon first. Remember, we've not gone back to the moon since the 1972s. I mean, looking at the audience, most people weren't born in 1972. And so we need to relearn. It's kind of like you drop the golf clubs for a while. You got to relearn the game. We got to relearn the game, how to get into space successfully. And remember, we have a hell of a lot more respect for life than the Chinese do. I mean, that's important to us. Our astronauts are American heroes, and we want to take away as many risks as possible. The concern for life, sadly, in China is not to our degree, and so we're going to do it right along these ways.
Right, yeah. Sending an astronauts to Mars next year would be possibly a one-way mission. That is a dangerous...
Yeah, I read the book, The Martian. We need to be very careful there.
And just as we sort of round up on our time here, for the next NASA administrator, it was interesting to see them choose someone from more the commercial side, not a former congressperson or someone deep in sort of the NASA leadership. Is there a type of person you would want to see as administrator? Or is there a type of set of skills you want to see leading the agency?
Look, I'm open to who the president wants. I think someone who understands that PPP relationship, I think, is a benefit. we're all now professional politicians in Washington, D.C., and we know the political side. I think we want someone who's willing to think outside the box, to recognize that these are partnerships with the private sector. And remember, this is not something new for NASA. If you look at the old footage from the Apollo days, you saw Boeing on the back of their jackets. I mean, this is a deal where we need to have these folks who understand this and can put pressure to reduce costs from the private sector, and also put pressure on NASA not to featherbed and just keep jobs for jobs' sake. So I want to see a person who has a capable track record, and I'm confident the president's going to find that person, and the Senate will hopefully do their job and not look blindly partisan and just sign, is this man or woman capable of leading this agency and beat the Chinese?
Yeah, that's about all the time we have. Thanks everyone for watching, and yeah, thanks again, Congressman.